So today we were working on a CodingBat question called array2 more14. So it says given an array of integers, return true if the numbers of ones is greater than the number of fours. So my idea here is to essentially have two integer variables, one of which, so the first one we'll keep track of how many fours there are. So we'll call this sum4, or actually we'll call it count4. And the second variable can be called count1, so that'll keep track of how many ones there are. And of course, after it's all said and done, we'll say, okay, if there are more ones, in other words, if count1 is greater than count4, I'll essentially just return true. Otherwise, I'll sort of return false. So coding this through here, it's not too complicated. We'll do exactly what we said. So we said we'll have one which will keep track of the count for count4, or let's just say 1 first. That'll be defaulted to 0. Int count4 will also be defaulted to 0. And then we're going to use a for loop to actually iterate through here. And this essentially allows us to sort of peek into each and every element in the array. And we'll have essentially two constraints in the array itself. We'll say, well, if any given element at any given index is equal to 1, then we'll increment the amount of count1. Otherwise, if the element at any given element is equal to 2, or sorry, 4, we'll essentially increment count4, or the count4 variable by 1. And this is actually supposed to be count1. So when we sense a count in the array, when we sense a 1 in the array, we increment count1 by 1. And if we sense a 4, we increment count4 by 1 as well. And so that will sort of keep adding on if any of these conditions is continuously satisfied. And of course, after it's all said and done, after the for loop is done executing and count1 or count4 have values for those variables, we can then of course compare whether or not count1 is greater than count4. And if it is, of course, we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll just return false. And you'll see here that we should have added a comma here, or a semicolon rather, to actually signify that we're done with this statement. And you'll see we have all greens. But one thing you want to remember here is if you're just assessing one condition, you can actually just return that condition. Which of course would lead to the same outcome, more or less.